Oh, that's helpful. Hello, this video is late, and that's what I get for stating an upload schedule in one of my previous videos. I was like, I'm gonna upload every Sunday, that's my schedule, I'm really proud I've stuck to it so far. And if my calculations are correct, this video is going up on a Wednesday, which is not a Sunday, so I skewed the schedule, I'm sorry. You will also be getting another video on Sunday. I'm just doing this one late, and then we'll return to business as usual. I don't know how long this video is, so you might need a snack or something, but I have quite a lot of notes because it's a subject I feel quite passionate about. So today we're going to be talking about Call Me By Your Name and its lesser sequel, Find Me. So, Call Me By Your Name is one of my favourite books, and I'm not sure if that's a controversial opinion or not. I know some people have issues with this book, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But I love this book. I saw the film first, and it completely enthralled me, and I sought out the book and it had the exact same effect. It's a story that I'm really passionate about. It's a story that I love. It's a story that I think is universal and can speak to so much of the human experience, and I do recommend it to a lot of people. Yeah. The main criticism that people level against Call Me By Your Name is the age gap between the characters that have a romantic relationship within this book. So Elio, the main character, is 17 at the time, and he has a relationship, affair, fling with Oliver, who at the time is 24. And I think this book tends to be marketed as a romance because it does have a romance in it. The romance plays an integral part to the story, but I think that's also what plays into a lot of people's disappointment and issues with the novel. The relationship is such an integral part of the text, but I wouldn't define the book as a romance at all. Elio and Oliver aren't star-crossed lovers. They aren't destined to be together. They aren't perfect for each other, and I don't think we're ever sold that idea in the book. We know that they have only 6 weeks together, that it is a summer fling, and that their time together is finite, and I think that's what makes it so special. That's what makes it so intense. But we're never really asked to buy into this idea that they're perfect for each other, they're the perfect couple, this is the perfect romance. And I feel like people going into this book wanting that are obviously disappointed because that's not what this book is about. Their relationship isn't perfect, like most aren't. Elio is 17, it's his first experience of love, and it's so intense for him, and some of the passages in the book are very intense, and it talks about how he wants to break Oliver's leg so that he can never get away from him, and that's really stupid and kind of worrying to take out of context, but it really communicates that overwhelming, intense feeling. And I don't think that book is advocating for this. A lot of people say that, you know, oh, it's so toxic how, you know, immature and how obsessed Elio is, and that Oliver then takes advantage of that. And I think to an extent, yes, Oliver enjoys the attention. I mean, this is a suburban setting away from kind of the city. It's quiet, there's not a lot going on. It's, you know, this underlying feeling of desire. And I think it does amuse Oliver to be seen by Elio as this suave guy when he also has a lot of insecurities himself. You know, he's also struggling with his sexuality and his morals because he has a partner back home. So there's a lot of complex stuff going on, and yes, if you want to put it in black and white and say Oliver takes advantage, therefore this book is toxic, this relationship is toxic and no one should read it, I think that's a really gross oversimplification of the story. The power dynamic definitely isn't equal. Oliver does hold more power, he has more experience, he knows more of the world, he's had more partners than Elio. Of course it's not equal, but that doesn't mean that it's not a valuable relationship. Through their relationship, Elio learns so much about who he is outside of that, about the world, about who he wants to go on to be, and I think that's so valuable. And just because relationships might be slightly toxic or might not be equal or not completely healthy, I don't think that means that we shouldn't write about them or we shouldn't read about them, you know? I think, let's get a bit cliche here, but I think the power that books have is to reflect life. You know, that's what people say books do, is they hold a mirror up to life, they tell you the truth. And I think if we just avoid writing about those relationships that aren't perfect, that aren't healthy, I don't see who wins in that situation, you know? I've not had relationships like Oliver and Elio's, but I've definitely had friendships that were toxic, that had power imbalances, that, you know, weren't good for me, but you know, through that experience I learned more about myself and the person I wanted to be and the relationships I wanted to have afterwards. So I do think writing about that is inherently valuable. And even though I've never been a gay 17-year-old boy, well, gay, bi, closeted, confused, whatever, and you want to define elio as, whilst I've never been that growing up in the 80s in a little suburb in Italy and then had an affair with this suave guy from America, I've never had that experience, but I did see parts of myself and parts of my experiences reflected in this book, and I think that's really powerful. So yeah, I don't see why this book is so often marketed as a romance. I see it as a coming of age novel. Through the romance, Elio discovers more about himself, who he wants to be in the world. It's a journey of self-discovery, and that's why it kind of gels so well with me, I think. Oliver is definitely the vehicle through which Elio discovers his own capacity for love and his own thirst for life. And obviously that speech at the end with Elio's dad is so powerful, because Elio's dad tells him to hold on to that feeling of heartbreak when it's all over, and to be grateful that it happened and not to rip out so much of yourself so you can be cured of pain faster. And it is about discovering the capacity that humans have for these deep, meaningful emotions. I mean, through this experience he learns what it is to be human, and I just don't understand how people can just take something so kind of, I don't know, arbitrary, like an age gap of like 7 years, and think that that's makes the book not valuable. I don't know. Also, I'm speaking as a person whose parents are 20 years apart, so maybe I just didn't see the kind of big deal with that. I don't know, I might be wrong, but... So, I've gushed about why I love Call Me By Your Name, and the construction is annoying the fuck out of me. Can you shut up? So I've gushed about why I love Call Me By Your Name, so it would stand to reason that I should want a sequel, right? The news of a sequel coming should have been music to my ears. It was not. I was not happy when they announced a sequel, simply because I didn't think the book needed one. It was as simple as that. There is a bit at the end of the book that flashes forward in time to when Elio and Oliver meet when they're much older, and then they discuss kind of what happened that summer. And that was kind of the perfect resolution to the end of the story for me. I didn't think we needed to check in with them again, and so I was a little bit confused when it was announced. So Find Me came out, and obviously I'd pre-ordered it, and I bought it, and it took me a while to read it. I actually just read it in my like lockdown reading vlog video, and I said I was very disappointed, and obviously now I can go into the reasons why. So like I said, the reason that I find Call Me By Your Name so powerful is because they know their time together is finite, that they won't live happily ever after, that they will just see and experience each other for this very fleeting, short moment. So then a sequel where they, you know, appear to live happily ever after, and, you know, it doesn't make much sense. It kind of undermines the power of Call Me By Your Name. So I was very torn about that. But then this doesn't play out like a traditional sequel. We don't start out with Oliver and Elio together again. In fact, Elio doesn't even make an appearance until page 100. So Find Me starts on a train. We're introduced to a man on a train who seems to have regrets about how his life has panned out. He is single, he had been married, and he's kind of reflecting on his life. And then there's a young woman gets on the train, sits opposite him, and then they start talking about love and relationships. And it's kind of like this, you know, it's a little bit pretentious, but, you know, there are some quite nice prose about, you know, missed opportunities and you know, the way that you can open up to a stranger because there is that knowledge that you'll never see them again. Like, that was quite a nice dynamic, and I was enjoying it, although I did not know who this man was. And then as the prose goes on, it becomes clear that this man is Elio's dad, so he is now separated from Elio's mum, and he's kind of reflecting on his life and love and everything like that. So I was intrigued. I liked Elio's dad as a character. The scene in Call Me By Your Name with Elio's dad is one of my favourites, and it was one of the most impactful. So I was interested to see what he was doing, you know, how his life was going. So then he and this woman, they get off the train, and you know, they start walking around this like little marketplace, and then he starts kind of commenting on her body when she's like leaning over to get vegetables and whatever. And I was a bit like, alright, sure, you know, okay. So then they go and have dinner with this woman's father, and then they walk back to Elio's dad's hotel room, and then they just sleep together. And in this kind of, you know, desire-filled evening, they talk about their future and how, oh my god, you're the person I've wanted forever, and you know, let's get married and let's run away and let's, you know, I can't believe it's taken me so long to find this type thing. And maybe I'm cynical, I don't know, but it didn't ring true for me at all. And what also was a little bit uncomfortable is Elio's dad, because it's narrated from his kind of point of view. We're in Elio's dad's head basically, and he keeps making reference to the fact that he's like twice the age of this woman, and that when he was young and looking for love, she hadn't even been born yet. And like, okay, that's true, that's a fact. But the fact that he keeps like mentioning it whilst they're kind of doing things, it just didn't feel, I don't know, it feels like, you know, the reason that he was so in rapture with this woman was not because of all her qualities, was because of the fact that she was half his age. And so the way the story is told is that there are vignettes, right? So the first vignette is of Elio's dad and where he is in his life. The middle vignette is of Elio and where Elio is in his life. And the last vignette is of Oliver and where Oliver is in his life. And this was an interesting structure. Like I did say, I wasn't interested in a sequel where we begin and Oliver and Elio are together and happy. That just didn't ring true. So these little check-ins that were kind of separate, but then, you know, maybe interlinked, that could have been really good, that could have been really interesting, but for a lot of reasons it did not work for me. So then in the second vignette we meet Elio, who is now in Paris, and he is a musician, I believe, and he's kind of just wandering around lecturing at this music hall, you know, living his best life essentially. Good for him. And then he goes to this concert at a church one evening and he meets this guy who, guess what, is is double his age. So this suave kind of silver fox older guy takes Elio out for dinner, and I was like, I hope it's not going where it's going, but let's be honest, we all know it's going where it's going, right? So then Elio and this older gentleman, I've forgotten his name, is it like Michel? What is his name? It is Michel, yes. So then Elio and Michel start their little love affair, they start sleeping together, and then they go away on a weekend to Michel's family home. And then it gets a little bit stupid, basically. So Michel tells Elio that, you know, well, it's gonna get confusing. So Michel says to Elio, my dad is dead. It's very sad, and I'm still sad about it. And in my dad's will, he left this score, this piece of music, and I don't know the significance of it. Can you help me find out what it is? So obviously Elio knows a lot about music. He's lecturing as a music person at this time. And so Elio helps him, and then basically they research it. It's a little bit boring. It's a little bit of a like, why is this here type thing. So they research it and then they find out that this piece of music was written either by Michel's dad or for Michel's dad, for someone or by someone, again, twice their age. So not only is Elio's dad having a romantic relationship with someone half his age, Elio's having a relationship with someone double his age, and then the person that Elio's with, dad, who's dead, had an affair with someone twice their age or half their age, whatever. I said that I didn't have a problem with the age gap in Call Me By Your Name, and that's an age gap of 7 years. And I don't really have a problem with an age gap of like 20 years. I said my parents are 20 years apart. I know it can work. But in a book with only 3 established relationships, why do they all have these huge age gaps? It just taints it completely. It doesn't feel like it's an accurate representation of these characters. It feels like some man writing about what his fetish is. Honestly, like, that's what it feels like. It's like, why does every single character have a relationship like this? It just felt weird. 1, it's unrealistic, and 2, yeah, it just feels like this guy's personal, I don't know, like, I felt really voyeuristic reading it, being like, wow, okay, you know, it just felt very self-indulgent, if you know what I mean. And then putting that in the context of some comments that the author made, which unfortunately this interview was after this book had been published and I'd bought it, so everyone that was like calling people out for reading it, I'd already bought it at that point. So during the press tour of this book, I believe, Andre Asselman did an interview where he said that he had spoken to a friend of his, and that basically they both find 12-year-old girls attractive, but it's like something that you're not supposed to say. Which obviously isn't great. It's not a good thing to say that you find 12-year-old girls attractive on a press tour for a book that has 3 relationships with like 20+ year age gaps. It's not great. And having that knowledge while reading this book did make me a little bit uncomfortable. Like I said, it just felt like I was reading about some person's personal fetish rather than about characters and their emotions and how they were feeling. So yeah, as a result of that interview, lots of people were then cancelling this book, were cancelling Call Me By Your Name, and for a good reason. It is a very uncomfortable comment to read. Obviously, Call Me By Your Name, the story, as I've explained in the first part of this video, means a lot to me, and it's still a story that will bring me joy, but I am very much wary about supporting Andre Asselman in the future, and if I ever want to seek out his work, I will probably try and get it secondhand, because it's not a good thing to say, and it's not a good thing to want to support, is it? So. And then we come to the third and final section of the book, which is Oliver's section. And Oliver, I think he's married to this woman and they have 2 kids, and he's hosting this very suave New York party in their very suave apartment. And he's got a lot of like attractive guests, and he's kind of swanning around this party commenting on how attractive all his guests are. So cool, great. Really valuable information that I was crying out for after the first book. Not really. And then he kind of very suddenly just leaves his wife, and it's like he kind of has a conversation with her where it's like, oh, you knew this would happen type thing, and I think she's like okay with it. But he does just leave his wife, his 2 kids, and then he goes back to Italy. He finds Elio, and by this point, Elio's dad has passed away, but Elio's dad had a kid with the woman he met on the train, and then Oliver and Elio are basically kind of helping raise this kid with the woman from the train, and they're going to live happily ever after as this little family type unit together. So not only in a sequel to Call Me By Your Name, a book about Elio and Oliver, mainly Elio, but not only in a sequel do they only spend about 12 pages together at the very end of the book, but then they get this snap happy ending that literally comes out of nowhere, and it's kind of what the book was trying to avoid. Like with this whole vignette structure, it was trying to tell you, look, it's not a classic sequel, it's not about them getting their happy ending, la la la. But then it just does that at the end. So I'm sitting there like, what is the point? What is the point? Like, the point of Call Me By Your Name, like I said, what I found so valuable about it was this finite amount of time, and that's why it meant so much. It was about using that experience to as the foundation for what you would go on to do in life, and for, you know, and finding it valuable. You know, there are moments in the vignette parts where Oliver and Elio reflect on how impactful that time together was. That doesn't mean that you should go back to it and leave your wife and kids. I just didn't understand how anyone was supposed to root for that, because we knew that they, like I said, they weren't ever destined to really work together. They were these 2 people that were kind of found themselves in each other's orbit, and then they were together, and then they were pulled apart, and that was why it was so beautiful, and why it was so heartbreaking, and why it was so impactful. And then this book comes along and just undermines all of that. I'm so confused as to why this exists. So reading this book was not only uncomfortable because of, like I said, all of the age gap things and the context of the author's comments, but also just because it was so unnecessary and just undermined everything I loved about the first book that still, to this day, means so much to me. Why? Why? So, I'm quite warm. I wore this, like, woolly poncho because it's cold today, but I just got so heated talking about that I might have to take it off in a minute because I'm sweaty. But yeah, allegedly Find Me is being turned into a film directed by the guy that directed Call Me By Your Name with the same cast. Allegedly, I don't know. Things fall through in the film industry all the time, so it might not happen. But I will be very curious to see how that turns out, what happens with that. I don't really want to see it, but it's kind of like a car crash, isn't it? Like, you can't really look away. So yeah, what are your feelings on Call Me By Your Name? Have you read the sequel? What did you think of the sequel? Sorry, I've spoiled it if you've not read the sequel. I just realised that, actually. Sorry. But, you know, it's not already worth your time, so you're welcome. You don't have to read it now. Oh no, I'm sorry. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I will see you soon with another one. Bye.